Hi everyone. Tonight we're traveling far back in time, to a night so cold your breath turns pale in the air and the stars feel sharp overhead. You're standing outside a stone cottage at the edge of a medieval village, your boots crunching over frost-stiffened mud. Smoke drifts from a crooked chimney, thin and quiet. Inside, a family of 6, along with 2 goats and a hen with a strong temperament, are doing their best not to freeze as they sleep. You likely wouldn't last this night without help, or at least without curling up beside the cow. So before you settle in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, only if you truly enjoy this content, and let me know in the comments where you are and what time it is for you right now. Now lower the lights. You push open the rough wooden door, and the cold slips in behind you like an uninvited guest. The cottage is small, mostly a single room, with a low roof and uneven stone walls. The fire has burned down to embers. Shadows flicker along the beams. The temperature presses on you, heavy and damp, the kind of cold that seeps into everything. And yet, this is home. This is where people lived, worked, cared for one another, and dreamed. The first thing you notice is the air. It carries the smell of peat smoke and boiled cabbage, with perhaps a trace of wool grease. It's thick, but alive. Moisture clings to every surface, even the walls, each stone as thick as your arm, hauled from nearby fields. Historians still debate whether these walls truly held heat or simply slowed the cold. You can almost imagine the discussion over a mug of mead, one side arguing for insulation, the other pointing out that stone remains cold long after the fire fades. One established fact is that most peasants in northern Europe slept in single-room cottages. Cooking, living, and sleeping all happened in the same space. Privacy was a luxury few expected. Strangely enough, some cottages had no chimneys at all. Smoke drifted upward and escaped through roof openings or gaps under the eaves. The result was lungs that aged quickly and rafters darkened nearly to charcoal. Still, the smoke had its uses. It helped preserve meat hung from beams and discouraged insects. A smoky benefit, if you will. You look toward the hearth, a shallow stone-lined pit glowing faintly. An iron pot hangs above the coals, blackened and worn. The family treats the fire like a living thing, never allowing it to die entirely. If it went out, someone would have to walk through the dark to a neighbor's home, carrying a glowing ember in a clay pot and hoping the wind didn't extinguish it. Fire here isn't about comfort, it's about survival. Your fingers tingle as you imagine the ache they felt, the constant effort to draw warmth from almost nothing. The soundscape is unfamiliar to modern ears. No appliances, no distant traffic. Just the quiet tick of cooling wood, the soft snort of a pig settling down, and the sound of your own breathing. The walls, rough and uneven, hold shadows like memories. You run your hand along them. They're damp even inside. Lime mortar carries the cold straight into your bones. Peasants sometimes pressed cloth or straw against the lower walls to block drafts, an early, desperate attempt at insulation. Scholars argue whether reeds or moss worked better. Perhaps it didn't matter much. The goal wasn't comfort as we know it, only keeping out the worst of the wind. Picture the family preparing for sleep. The eldest son stirs the fire. The mother murmurs a prayer. The youngest is already asleep, curled into a pile of straw. You watch them move and settle, each action efficient, learned through repetition. They've endured winters before. They know the pattern. Stay close, share warmth, sleep lightly. It isn't romantic, despite what later stories suggest. The smell is strong, animal sweat, unwashed wool. The earthen floor releases its own damp scent. And yet, there's care here. You see it when the father tucks a blanket, really a patchwork of coarse wool and old cloaks, around his daughter's shoulders. You hear it when he whispers a blessing, asking the saints to watch over the house until morning. History offers its odd details. Some peasants, short on cloth, slept under cloaks lined with fur or straw. In harsher times, they used upturned sacks filled with chaff. One chronicler claimed villagers near the Baltic rubbed fish oil on their hands and faces to prevent frostbite, a memorable scent to fall asleep with. Outside, moonlight draws silver lines across the snow. Inside, darkness nearly takes over. Light comes only from the embers and a faint star through a narrow window slit. That opening is covered with oiled parchment that trembles in the breeze. No glass here, not yet. The wind moans softly, a lullaby older than words. You might think sleep here would be impossible, but it isn't. Exhaustion was the great sedative of the Middle Ages. After 10 or 12 hours of labor, from dawn to dusk, the body simply gives in. The cold fades into the background, like a ticking clock. Still, people adapted. You curl instinctively into a fetal position, conserving heat. You tuck your hands under your arms. You share warmth and breath with whoever lies closest. Medieval nights were filled with shifting bodies and quiet murmurs, dreams blending with waking life. The scholarly debate continues in your thoughts. Did peasants feel cold differently? Some anthropologists argue that generations of exposure raised their tolerance. Others insist the human body never truly adapts, it only endures. Either way, endurance here becomes a practice skill. Frost begins to form on the inside of the window. A rooster outside stirs too early, fooled by moonlight. Beneath the straw bedding, a mouse searches for crumbs. Through it all, the family sleeps, vulnerable yet persistent, balanced between breath and ice. You take one last look around. A rough table. A wooden stool. Tools leaning against the wall. A basket of turnips glowing faintly in the firelight. This is their entire world, shelter, labor, and hope, contained within a single stone room. It's small, modest, and remarkably alive. The embers blink like tired eyes, and you feel your own begin to close. The wind's sound becomes steady, calming, almost hypnotic. You imagine lying among them, sharing fragile warmth, aware that the cold waits patiently outside. But for tonight, the stone house holds. You drift into that first medieval sleep, neither safe nor comfortable, yet undeniably human. You wake sometime after midnight, unsure how long you've slept. The fire has settled into quiet embers, glowing faintly. Your breath clouds the air. The rough stone walls shine softly, as if hiding a thin layer of frost. This is when you truly understand what it means to sleep within stone. The walls are indifferent to your comfort. They simply exist, absorbing warmth by day and releasing a slow, reluctant chill that seeps deep into your bones. You pull the blanket closer. It smells of sheep's wool, smoke, and a trace of damp earth. This, you come to understand, is the scent of survival. The stones forming this home were dragged in from nearby fields, lifted by hands already worn and stiff from work. Each stone carries fragments of the land itself, river silt, coarse grit, and sometimes fossils that villagers may have seen as God's own marks. Historians continue to debate whether these thick stone cottages were a gift or a burden. Some argue they represented durability, offering resistance to fire and decay. Others insist they were cold enclosures that never truly held warmth, especially in homes without chimneys. One thing is clear, by the late Middle Ages, many rural European homes were built of stone not for comfort, but for necessity. In certain areas, wood was scarce or reserved for fences, tools, and repairs. Stone, by contrast, was free if you had the strength to carry it. The irony is unmistakable. The stronger the house, the colder the nights inside. You reach out and place your hand against the wall. Even in freezing weather, it feels damp. Moisture slips through tiny cracks, drawn by the contrast between warm breath and outdoor frost. To fight drafts, people often coated walls with mud mixed with straw or hung woven mats along the interior. These served as simple insulation, creating pockets of still air. They were functional rather than decorative, tapestries of necessity. Over time, they absorbed smoke, odors, and memory equally. There is a quiet closeness within such rooms. The stone feels responsive, almost alive. Every cough echoes back. Every whispered prayer seems to stay behind. Outside wind is softened but constant, reminding you that nature presses just beyond the wall. You can sense the weight of snow above, the thatched roof shifting under its load. Old records mention an interesting detail. In some northern villages, interiors were coated with lime wash not only for cleanliness, but because people believed white walls reflected heat from the fire. This did not truly increase warmth, but it brightened the room, and perhaps that sense of light felt close enough. Picture lying here with a family of 6. The father sleeps nearest the door, ready to rise first. The mother rests beside the youngest child, turning the baby's face away from smoke. Older children cluster together under a shared cloak. Above the doorway hangs a dried bundle of herbs, maybe rosemary or yarrow, meant to keep harmful spirits from entering with the cold air. People feared more than winter. They feared what traveled with it. Your thoughts wander. Firelight flickers across the stone, revealing small carvings scratched into the mortar. Maybe a cross, maybe a rough face, maybe a simple plea for protection. Many cottages carried such markings: initials, symbols, rough figures of saints. Some archaeologists see them as protective signs. Others view them as idle decoration from long winters indoors. Most likely they were both. The wall beneath your fingers feels coarse, almost abrasive. In daylight, it would appear gray, spotted with brown and hints of mossy green. In summer, these same stones might release gentle warmth after hours of sun. In winter, they betray you, pulling heat from every breath and body. There is no insulation, no buffer, just human life pressed directly against bare geology. A rat darts across the floor, drawn by warmth lingering in the ashes. It startles you, but the family barely moves. They expect it. Night sounds are familiar, even calming. The walls seem to carry them: the creak of wood, the breath of wind, the soft movement of small creatures. Together, they form the rhythm of sleep. You realize these people understood their homes differently. The cottage was not merely shelter, it was a living partner. They patched it, filled it with smoke, repaired it after storms. They called it home not because it was comfortable, but because it lasted. There is beauty in that persistence. Modern comfort depends on control. Medieval warmth relied on patience. You shift beneath the blanket, imagining the rough feel of wool against skin. Even breathing feels heavy, tinged with smoke and closeness. Beneath the floor, a layer of straw cushions the earth. It stirs softly whenever someone moves. In an odd way, it feels alive as well, breathing alongside you. Historians often point out that peasant cottages were built as much from habit as from planning. A man copied his father's work, improving small details over time. They understood just enough about angles and airflow to keep smoke rising rather than suffocating them. Still, smoke often filled the room before escaping through the roof opening. From a distance, a traveler might see a village glowing faintly, each cottage releasing a pale plume into the night, as if the land itself were exhaling. Debate continues over whether this smoke had benefits. Some scholars suggest it helped drive insects from bedding and thatch. Others argue it damaged eyesight long before old age. Both claims likely hold truth. Yet people continued burning wood, peat, or dung, because the alternative, a cold, silent darkness, was far worse. You lie still and listen as wind brushes against stone outside. There is reassurance in its endurance. These walls have survived famine, disease, and countless winters. They remain, holding the memory of every person who leaned against them. You imagine other hands once resting where yours now lies, separated by generations, united by the same cold breath. The fire sighs. Someone nearby shifts and murmurs in sleep. Another body's warmth slowly spreads through the blankets. You close your eyes, letting breath and wind blend into a single steady rhythm. The house settles fully into night. The stones creak, almost satisfied. And here, between frost and time, you learn what warmth truly is, not luxury but endurance. The fire stirs again. You hear the gentle crack as a fresh log meets the embers. A brief spark flashes orange across the walls before fading to deep red. You blink in the shifting light, watching smoke curl upward toward the low rafters, caught in a motion that never quite ends. This modest fire is the center of everything. Every breath, every meal, every night's rest depends on it. The hearth is simple, a shallow pit or a ring of stones, perhaps reinforced with bricks taken from a ruined manor. Above it hangs a bent iron hook holding a pot that smells faintly of grain and onion. For a medieval peasant, this was more than a cooking place, it was the heart of the home. Without this flame, there was no heat, no food, no light. It marked the fragile line between survival and the cold pressing at the door. You kneel closer, letting the warmth reach your face. It is never sufficient, yet always valuable. Smoke stings your throat, but you accept it. The room feels alive once more. Historians agree that the central hearth was often the sole heat source in rural homes. Chimneys were uncommon in early periods, especially among peasants. Smoke filled the space before drifting slowly through roof openings or gaps near the eaves. Rafters darkened, lungs filled with soot, but people adjusted. They learned to live within smoke, much like fish live within water. The understated reality is that the smoke brought several practical advantages. It kept insects away, dried herbs hung from the rafters, and helped preserve meat stored near the ceiling. Over time, it even strengthened the wooden beams, forming a protective smoky layer that slowed decay. Modern restorations still uncover centuries-old rafters stained deep black, clear evidence of countless fires burning below. You observe the family moving in the dim light. The mother tends the embers, narrowing her eyes against the haze. The children are only partly awake, hair untamed, faces warm and flushed from the fire. The father kneels close to the hearth, hands extended toward the heat, palms cracked and reddened, quietly speaking to the flames as if to a familiar companion. In many medieval homes, the hearth held a sense of respect. Before sleep, someone might murmur a blessing, hoping the fire would last through the night. At sunrise, they would offer thanks if it had endured. Picture the rhythm shaping their days. Morning begins by coaxing sparks back to life. Evening ends with protecting glowing embers. Each night carries risk. If the fire died completely, someone had to rush to a neighbor's home with a small container to borrow a live coal. This practice was known as fire borrowing, and in some villages it symbolized mutual trust. Refusing to share fire could label a household as cruel or even unlucky. This is a well-documented historical detail. By the later Middle Ages, some wealthier homes installed smoke hoods or basic chimneys, but these were rare comforts. For most peasants, the open hearth remained unchanged. It filled the home with warmth, risk, and memory. Sparks could leap out, igniting clothing or thatch and causing sudden destruction. Entire villages lost homes to fire during harsh winters, yet the flame was never abandoned. You lean closer and watch the firelight cast gold and shadow across faces. The stones surrounding the hearth gleam from centuries of heat. They carry a faint scent of ash and salt. A pot suspended above the flames simmers quietly, releasing steam tinged with the smell of barley. You imagine the relief this brought after days of scarcity. Here, warmth and food are inseparable. Historians still debate how effectively these hearths warmed stone houses. Some argue the heat reached only those gathered close. Others suggest the smoke-filled air formed a rough insulating layer beneath the roof beams. Both ideas may hold truth. You can almost test it yourself by stepping back a few paces. At once, the warmth fades. Cold creeps back through your feet, reminding you that comfort was measured by distance, not by rooms. A small household scene continues. The mother pours thin stew into wooden bowls and places them near the hearth, where steam curls into the smoky air. The children eat silently, still half asleep. The fire crackles softly, like quiet laughter. In moments like these, the hearth is everything. It serves as kitchen, heater, light source, guardian, and gathering place. Without the fire, faces dissolve into darkness. You notice how the smoke thickens overhead, forming a hazy ceiling. Light escapes only faintly through the opening in the roof. The soot above catches flashes of gold from the flames, turning the rafters into a dim, shimmering chamber. It is both striking and stifling. The smell clings to hair and clothing. Your skin feels slick from the smoke, yet the familiarity brings comfort. The air tastes like life still continuing. Travelers recorded an interesting observation. Peasants often predicted weather by watching how smoke behaved. If it lingered low, rain was expected. If it rose straight and clean, fair weather lay ahead. Without instruments, smoke served as a forecast. The family begins to settle once more. The bowls are empty, the pot pushed aside. The father gathers the coals into a small pile and lightly covers them with ash to preserve their heat until morning. He murmurs a brief rhyme, part prayer, part superstition. Words meant to appease unseen forces or perhaps to keep bad dreams away. The warmth slowly recedes, replaced by the steady cold that dominates most of the room. Shadows stretch across the floor. Somewhere behind you, a goat shifts its weight, reminding you that animals share every corner of this space. The child closest to the hearth rolls over, one bare foot slipping free from the blanket. Without speaking, the mother gently tucks it back in. Outside, frost thickens along the narrow window opening. The fire's glow flickers faintly across the stones, softening their edges for a moment, almost giving them life. You close your eyes and listen to the slow rhythm of the coals as they breathe. The house settles into its nightly pulse. Fire glowing, people sleeping, walls standing still. You can sense the pressure of centuries overhead. The endless repetition of nights like this. Generations tending embers, whispering to flames, resting beside a fire that never fully went out. You are part of that pattern now. One presence among many. As the night deepens, your gaze drifts upward toward the roof. You notice the faint outline of thatch and thin gaps where stars sometimes show through. Each gust of wind makes the rafters creak softly, sending tiny bits of straw falling down. This is the medieval ceiling, alive in its own way, shifting, shedding, and breathing. It is striking to realize that this fragile layer separates you from the frozen sky. The roof is built from bundles of straw tied to wooden beams, laid thick but never perfectly sealed. When rain begins, the sound is calming at first, like a lullaby, until drops start to fall through. A few land in a pot placed near the bed, creating a quiet rhythm that peasants accepted as normal. Some nights they would wake, move their bedding slightly to avoid the drip, and fall asleep again without concern. Historical records show that many cottages reinforced thatch with mud or dung to add weight and improve water resistance. Though unusual by modern standards, this method helped roofs last longer and kept them secure in strong winds. The smell was distinctive and hard to ignore. Yet for those living beneath it, that scent signaled protection. Interestingly, these roofs often sheltered animals as well. Mice, sparrows, and even hens nested in the straw. Farmers joked that their chickens lived upstairs. Some claimed hens laid more eggs when kept near the warmth rising from the smoke. In practice, the reality was less pleasant. Scratching, fluttering, and the occasional heavy thump at night were simply part of daily life. You can almost sense the texture of the straw above you. Rough, dusty, and layered with history. In summer, it blocks the sun's heat. In winter, it traps the small amount of warmth rising from the hearth. Years of smoke darken the underside, sealing it like a crude varnish. Every part of it reflects resilience and adaptation. Some specialists believe the smoky coating helped protect the thatch from insects and decay. Others argue its effect was minimal. There is no agreement on how often these roofs needed replacement. What is certain is that they required constant care. Each spring, someone climbed up to add fresh bundles, sealing gaps before rain could enter. Imagine standing on the roof on a cold morning. Fingers stiff with cold, straw slick with frost. You would work from memory, binding reeds with cords twisted from hemp. Each movement followed a pattern learned by watching elders, passed down through generations. When you finally climbed back down, the smell of smoke and wet grass stayed on your clothes, clinging for days. Inside, the roof sat so low you could nearly touch it. Smoke drifted slowly around the beams, giving them a dull shine in the weak light. People often hung herbs and garlic there to dry, trusting that the rising warmth would add flavor and offer protection. Folklore claimed that homes heavy with the scent of garlic and sage were avoided by evil spirits. Whether this belief came from faith or lived experience is less important than its effect. The mind, like the body, needs a sense of safety. A single candle flickers beside the hearth, its light catching a small spiderweb stretched between rafters. The web shakes gently with each breath of wind. You imagine snow sliding off the roof, followed by a silence so deep that your own heartbeat becomes audible. This is not a peaceful quiet, but the stillness of winter pausing in anticipation. Archaeological findings show that roofs were built in layers using whatever materials were close at hand. In wetlands, reeds took the place of straw. In rocky regions, Turf cut from hillsides was common, with grass still growing on top. These green roofs were heavy yet insulating, their roots holding the earth together. Some even bloomed with wildflowers in warmer months. The boundary between home and landscape was never sharply defined. You picture the smoke from outside, slipping through the thatch like pale fingers and fading into the night. Travelers could spot villages from far away by these thin plumes glowing softly under moonlight. The scent of burning wood mixed with livestock and damp soil, creating an atmosphere that was neither pleasant nor unpleasant, simply real. Perfection was never expected here. What mattered was upkeep. Roofs leaked, walls split, doors warped in rain. Life consisted of constant repairs, small acts resisting decay. These flaws allowed the house to breathe. Gaps and cracks let smoke escape and fresh air enter. If the structure were sealed too tightly, the family might never wake again. One traveler described such a cottage as a living house, and the description fits. Every joint, reed, and stone shifted with weather and age. The building was always moving. When strong winds blew, it seemed to lean into them, as if acknowledging the storm. You close your eyes and imagine resting beneath that roof, listening to straw softly shifting. A drop of water touches your cheek. You pull the blanket closer and smile slightly. The steady drip turns into a lullaby. Above you, a hen settles herself, feathers brushing straw as she prepares for the night. The fire's warmth remains, a thin barrier between you and the cold pressing beyond the thatch. This, you understand, is what survival in a stone house meant. Not defeating the cold, but coexisting with it. Accepting smoke, leaks, and animals overhead. You drift toward sleep again, the roof whispering above you, part comfort, part warning, fully alive. The fire fades to a soft amber glow, yet the air feels warmer, gentler, filled with the quiet sound of shared breathing. You shift on the straw mattress and realize that warmth does not come from the fire alone. It comes from people gathered closely together. This is the core of medieval survival, shared heat. Families slept close not only out of affection, but from necessity. The human body produces heat, and several bodies wrapped in rough blankets could raise the room's temperature by degrees. This form of human insulation was simple, but effective. The idea of separate beds for each person would have seemed wasteful. Why let warmth escape? Picture the arrangement. The father sleeps nearest the door, serving as both guard and barrier against drafts. The mother lies behind him, the youngest child between them, older children nearby in a loose cluster of blankets and limbs. Animals contribute as well. A piglet curls near the feet, giving off steady warmth through the straw. A goat by the hearth shifts and grunts softly, stirring the air with life. Historical sources note that in many northern villages, livestock shared indoor space during winter nights. Cows, goats, even geese were brought inside. Their body heat warmed the room, and their presence reassured the people. This was not unusual. The line between human and animal life was practical, not moral. Both needed warmth. Both provided it. Both relied on each other. Some records mention low partitions built not for cleanliness, but to keep larger animals from stepping on sleeping children. The animals were part of the nightly routine, just like the fire. A calm herd meant safety. If a cow stirred suddenly or a dog barked, it could signal danger outside. In this way, everyone shared the role of night watch. Scholars still debate how peasants managed smell and hygiene in such spaces. Some suggest that smoke and manure discouraged parasites, while others argue they spread illness. Likely both views hold truth. Medieval ideas of cleanliness differed from modern ones. Dirt was acceptable if it kept out the cold. Smoke masked odors, and soot absorbed them. Despite its roughness, the house maintained a balance of its own. The air feels thick but oddly reassuring. Heat, breath, and animal presence create a steady rhythm, as if every living thing inside follows the same pulse. You hear it in a child's slow breathing, a cow's deep sigh, the wood creaking as it expands with warmth. Outside, wind sweeps across empty fields, but indoors it sounds distant, almost irrelevant. It is said that children slept so deeply in this warmth that frost formed on the inside of the window while they dreamed. Before dawn, parents would scrape the ice away with a dull blade, letting faint light return. Morning brought movement, and movement brought heat. The body learned to pursue warmth through action. One account from a traveling monk describes a village where family members took turns sleeping closest to the hearth. Each night, one moved nearer the embers while another shifted away, sharing the fire's final warmth fairly. Simple as it sounds, it shows how carefully heat was managed. Without stoves, thick blankets, or insulation, fairness was measured in temperature. You turn slightly and imagine the closeness of so many bodies. The air feels dense yet safe. Privacy has no place here, and no one expects it. Familiar sounds fill the room, quiet murmurs, straw shifting, an occasional snore. To modern ears it might seem disorderly, but here it signals comfort. Alone, you would freeze. Together, you endure. There is gentleness in this arrangement. A mother's arm around her child. A father's hand resting lightly on the edge of a blanket. The steady rise and fall of shared breathing. Warmth becomes love made physical, the shared heartbeat of survival. Archaeological evidence confirms that beds were often simple wooden frames or woven supports, topped with straw or dried reeds. Over time, straw bedding was replaced not out of comfort, but necessity, as it eventually developed strong odors. The phrase "hit the hay" may trace back to these nights, when families settled onto straw beds while livestock shifted nearby. It is easy to idealize this closeness, but it often brought real discomfort. Fleas thrived in the straw, and the air could feel heavy and close. Still, despite these hardships, peasant households maintained a deep connection to their environment. They experienced life directly through temperature, sound, and stillness. Daily existence was raw, physical, and immediate. Some modern anthropologists believe that sharing warmth also strengthened emotional ties, not just practical survival. When families slept pressed together through long winters, they learned to breathe in sync, move carefully, and respond naturally to one another's needs. Disagreements often faded during the night beneath thick coverings, replaced by the shared understanding that survival the next day depended on cooperation. Listening to the quiet breathing of sleepers, one can sense a lesson in closeness. It teaches patience, humility, and mutual reliance. Even as the fire weakened, warmth passed quietly from body to body like an unspoken agreement. You close your eyes again, feeling heat gather beneath the covers, and briefly forget the world beyond the stone walls. The cottage exhales gently, alive with collective endurance. In that shared breath, the cold slowly retreats. You wake before dawn, though calling it morning feels generous. The fire has nearly gone out, its final glow buried beneath gray ash. You shiver and pull the rough blanket closer. It scratches against your skin, woven from coarse wool shaped by years of use. This same material once covered sheep outdoors and now serves a second purpose as protection from the cold. In medieval life, every piece of fabric mattered. Peasants owned few clothes, and most textiles were produced at home. The blankets are patchworks made from old tunics, cloaks, and worn hoods. Each section carries memory. A piece of your mother's cloak may lie beside a strip from your brother's sleeve. When cloth required months of labor, nothing went unused. You trace the weave with your fingers, as rough as bark. The wool irritates the skin, yet traps heat effectively. Beneath it, straw rustles softly, a reminder that comfort here has limits. Sleeping beneath all you own is not desperation, but routine. It is the steady rhythm of winter, as reliable as rain on the roof. In colder regions, people sometimes slept fully dressed, adding layers instead of removing them. A tunic, cloak, and wool cap could mean the difference between rest and shivering. A 14th-century traveler once observed that peasants slept as though they expected to wake in open fields. He was correct. Warmth functioned as armor, even during sleep. You shift slightly, hearing the faint creak of the wooden frame. The ropes beneath the straw sag loosely and require frequent tightening, giving rise to the phrase "sleep tight," which survives even as its meaning is forgotten. You pull the blanket closer, appreciating its weight, the comfort of something solid between you and the cold. There is a quiet order to these layers: wool, straw, linen, skin, then breath, each holding a little more heat than the last. Parish records from rural England suggest that families sometimes used sheep hides with fleece still attached for extra warmth. The smell must have been strong, but it was effective. Even cured leather served as a rough barrier against drafts. Some historians suggest sleeping garments were chosen partly for belief as well as comfort. A linen shirt was thought to protect the soul during dreams. Removing it could invite illness or spirits, depending on belief. Others dismissed such ideas, but when temperatures dropped below freezing, belief itself became another layer of protection. You glance at the small chest near the bed. Inside are a few carefully folded garments. A spare tunic, a cloak with a torn edge, wool stockings patched at the knees. These are valuables beyond money. One well-made blanket could represent weeks of labor. When someone died, their clothing stayed behind, reshaped into warmth for those still living. Researchers still debate how colorful these fabrics were. Some remnants show muted browns and grays, while others reveal faded reds or greens made from plant dyes. Though poor households favored plain tones, firelight transformed them, making the colors glow softly. Beauty entered survival wherever it could. An often overlooked detail is the use of bed curtains. Even modest homes sometimes hung coarse linen or burlap around the bed to block drafts. This created a small enclosed space, a shelter within the cold room. Curtains held warmth and softened sound, turning a straw bed into a private refuge. Wrapped in layers of wool, listening to the wind outside, the bed became more than a place to sleep. It was protection built from fabric and breath. Your heartbeat matches the slow creak of the timbers. Above, the roof murmurs as the thatch settles. Below, straw shifts with each movement. Folklore records a belief that placing iron, such as a nail or pin, beneath the pillow warded off cold spirits. Whether literal or symbolic, the meaning is clear. In a world where cold could kill, it was given form and resisted. As early light filters through the narrow window, the cottage changes color. Gray walls turn gold under the soft arrival of dawn. The family stirs. The mother lifts her head, hair tangled, breath visible in the air. She offers a faint smile and draws the smallest child closer beneath the blanket. Warmth here is a daily achievement. Waking alive after such a night meant winning another battle against the season. Each layer of wool, each handful of straw, each shared breath played a role. Comfort was not softness, but endurance. The father rekindles the fire, and its glow returns, dim, but steady, casting familiar light across the room. You stretch, stiffness easing from your limbs. The cold remains, waiting, but for now you are wrapped in warmth shaped by labor, patience, and instinct. You close your eyes again, not to sleep, but to remember the texture of the blanket, the faint smoke in your hair, the gentle hum of life in the room. These sensations become a kind of lullaby, older than comfort, quieter than time. You turn onto your side as the straw whispers beneath you. The bed creaks softly, a tired voice in the stillness. By modern standards, it offers no comfort at all, just timber, rope, and straw, yet it carries the full weight of every night's dreams. It is well documented that medieval beds, even in modest cottages, differed according to region and household means. The poorest people slept directly on the floor atop heaps of straw, often referred to as bed ticks. Others used low wooden frames laced with ropes woven in a loose crisscross pattern that gradually sagged with use. To tighten them, a person would pull a wooden peg or simply retie the knots. The familiar phrase, "sleep tight," is believed to come from this small nightly task. Above these ropes lay a straw mattress filled with whatever materials the season provided. After harvest, it was usually wheat straw. In summer, dried rushes were common, and in coastal areas, even seaweed was used. With each refill, the smell changed. At first, it was fresh and mildly pleasant, carrying a faint reminder of the fields. Over time, after weeks of sweat, smoke, and fleas, that freshness disappeared. Even so, it remained far better than lying on bare stone. Interestingly, in some rural regions, dried heather replaced straw. It had a sharp, clean scent, and its flexible stems created a softer surface, a small luxury if enough could be gathered. Folklore claimed that sleeping on heather encouraged good dreams and kept away harmful spirits, though the real advantage was likely improved comfort and rest. You run your hand along the bed frame. The wood feels uneven, splintered in spots, worn smooth in others by years of use. The ropes dip slightly, creaking under weight. Several pegs have been replaced with carved pieces of bone or antler, whatever materials were available. Nothing matches perfectly, yet everything works together. The beauty is found in the flaws, in how necessity shaped the design. Archaeological evidence shows that wealthier peasants sometimes built box beds enclosed on 3 sides with wooden panels. The warmth inside such a confined space must have been remarkable. Even the light of a single candle could noticeably raise the temperature. Some of these beds included sliding doors that could be pulled shut at night, turning them into compact sleeping chambers. For families with little privacy, these enclosures offered both warmth and a brief sense of seclusion. You can almost sense the comfort of resting inside one. The wooden walls seem to hum softly, holding your breath close. Outside, the room carries the sounds of animals shifting and the steady rhythm of wind against the door. Inside the bed, the world narrows to a heartbeat, a pocket of warmth, and the smell of dry straw. Some scholars believe that bed construction reflected local traditions as much as practical needs. In areas rich in timber, frames tended to be more detailed. In stonier regions, beds might rest on stacked rock or packed clay. The form changed with the land itself. There is something quietly moving in that idea, as though the earth helped shape how people slept and dreamed. A curious find from a French excavation revealed beds stuffed with leaves rather than straw. Researchers were able to identify oak and hazel leaves. Perhaps this was an autumn solution, or perhaps villagers believed certain leaves offered protection. There is no clear agreement on the reason, but the detail highlights the creativity born of survival. Imagine lying on that mix of straw and rope. Smoke clings to everything, blending with the earthy scent of the mattress. Each movement releases a soft rustle. Sleep does not come in silence, but within a gentle blend of sounds that ease the mind. The body learns to listen differently in such a place. Even discomfort becomes familiar, almost calming. At the foot of the bed sits a small chest, often the only piece of furniture large enough to store belongings. Inside are folded clothes, a wooden bowl, and perhaps a few small items: a comb, a needle, a rosary made of bone. Sometimes a feather or a sprig of lavender is tucked among the clothing as a charm for restful sleep. In these gestures, practicality and belief quietly merge. Historians have long debated how peasants positioned their beds in relation to the hearth. Some argue the bed was placed close enough to catch warmth from the fire, while others suggest it was kept farther away to avoid sparks and smoke. The reality likely depended on available space. In a single-room home, every corner served a purpose, and comfort was measured in inches, not theories. You picture the family now, lying together in their shared bed. The father's arm rests around the youngest child. The mother's hand lies near the edge, ready to tend the fire if it weakens. A dog curls near their feet, twitching in sleep. Above them, the roof sighs under the weight of frost, and the bed becomes a small island within a vast darkness. Later records note one unusual practice. Some peasants placed heated stones wrapped in cloth at the foot of the bed. Warmed in the fire before sleep, these stones acted as simple heating devices. The idea feels almost modern, yet it carried the same goal: to preserve warmth a little longer. The stones cooled quickly, but the comfort they gave in those first moments was likely worth the effort. You settle into the thought of that warmth: the rough blanket, the presence of another body beside you, the faint crackle of a dying fire. Sleep arrives slowly and gently, like drifting into a familiar hum. Every creak of rope and sigh of straw becomes a lullaby. The night presses close, but the bed holds steady, as it has held countless lives before. It becomes clear that these people did more than endure their nights. They shaped them with rope, straw, fabric, and patience. They created moments of gentleness in a world that was often harsh. You close your eyes, sensing the weight of centuries settle into quiet ease. The cold waits outside, persistent but distant, while inside, the warmth of human effort hums softly beneath dreams. The night continues, a slow river of darkness moving through the cottage. The fire has faded to a dull orange glow, its heat more memory than presence. The scent of wood lingers, carrying a sweet trace of ash and smoke. The air grows colder now, but not entirely hostile. There is a rhythm to it, a calm known only to those who have accepted cold as a companion. In the Middle Ages, it was common to let fires die down gradually. Wood was valuable, gathered by hand or obtained through trade. Each ember was precious, carefully preserved for morning. People learned not to conquer the cold, but to live alongside it. The hearth was treated almost like a living thing, tended with care but never indulged. Wasting would risk hunger later. Household records often mention a simple but clever practice, keeping a single ember alive overnight by burying it in ash. This allowed the coal to smolder unseen until morning. At first light, the mother or eldest child would uncover it, feed it twigs, and greet it like an old friend. This habit spared many from the hardship of striking a new fire with flint in freezing air. You lie there now, watching the dim hearth, feeling the cold reach its deepest point. It is the bone-deep chill that comes just before dawn, when even the air seems to rest. Nearby animals breathe softly, their breath faintly visible in the dark. Every living thing has drawn itself smaller, pulled tight against the frost. Chronicles from Northern Europe note that winter nights inside stone cottages could fall to freezing temperatures, even indoors. Water left in bowls sometimes formed a skin of ice. Rest in such conditions seems difficult to imagine, yet people managed. They layered themselves in every bit of warmth they had and endured the night together. Straw, wool, bodies, and belief shaped the night. For them, the long dark hours were not something to endure, but a routine, practiced again and again until spring arrived. Interestingly, sleep itself followed a different pattern. Night was split into two phases, a first sleep and a second sleep, with a calm waking period between them. During this pause, people moved quietly, prayed, spoke in low voices, or checked the fire. Sometimes they exchanged a few words, the way people do when half awake and drifting. The house glowed dimly, filled with wood smoke and warm breath. Some historians suggest this broken sleep was a natural reaction to environment and daily life. Others argue it developed from survival needs, requiring people to rise and tend fires or animals. No clear answer exists, but records remain. Diaries, court cases, and letters from later centuries mention this watch between sleeps. It was a moment for closeness and reflection, when darkness fully belonged to human thought. It is easy to imagine. The soft crack of stirred embers, murmured voices, a child asking something quietly, a parent replying with a story. Outside, frost spreads across the ground, but inside, life resumes briefly. It feels less like resisting the cold and more like living alongside it. There is a quiet grace in this rhythm. Night moves in two stages just as people do. They learn to rest in intervals, trusting that warmth would return as surely as the second sleep. The fire serves as a clock, its glow marking time more gently than bells ever could. Archaeological evidence shows hearths were often raised slightly above the floor, helping them hold heat longer. Stones absorbed warmth during the day and released it slowly at night. You can imagine lying close to that mild heat, the last comfort sinking into your bones. In homes without chimneys, the ground could feel warmer than the air above it. A medieval English superstition held that gazing into the final ember before sleep revealed the soul's condition. A steady glow meant calm. A weak, flickering coal suggested trouble or wrongdoing. People took this seriously, sometimes whispering prayers or apologies to the fire before turning away. It may seem strange now, but in those smoky, silent nights, the fire was a companion, nearly alive. You look toward the shadowed shapes of family in the dark. The youngest child has pulled the blanket over their head. The father lies unmoving, his hand near the hearth. The mother shifts slightly, perhaps dreaming of fields that will not thaw for months. Each face is faintly lit, delicate yet resilient. The fire snaps once, sharp and brief, echoing off stone. A spark jumps, then vanishes. You feel a small pulse of warmth on your cheek. In that moment, warmth is more than heat. It is presence, endurance, something that lasts quietly even as light fades. You listen again as the house speaks in its own way. A creak from the rafters, wind sighing outside, a cow breathing low and slow. Each sound signals survival. In this cold, nothing truly rests. Everything waits. The embers glow like half-closed eyes, ancient and watchful. Your breathing slows to match them. Beyond the walls lies frost and stillness. Inside this smoky shelter, life continues in murmurs. You close your eyes and picture morning, the first pale light showing fresh frost on every surface. But for now, in this space between sleeps, you remain beside the fading fire, listening to the quiet rhythm of endurance. The second sleep arrives gently, wrapped in the silence that follows the fire's final breath. You shift and feel your nightshirt, rough but familiar, offering comfort through texture rather than softness. Medieval sleep was not about ease or solitude. It relied on routine, layers, and trust that the night would pass safely. Records show that even the poorest households owned some form of nightwear. Most wore the same linen shirt used during the day, loosened at the collar and tied with cloth. Wealthier people sometimes had a separate nightshirt, plain and long, meant to protect skin and bedding. Cleanliness was relative, but linen had one advantage. It allowed air to pass in the heavy cottage atmosphere. You pull at the coarse sleeve, noticing how it scrapes your wrist. The fabric carries a faint smell of smoke and wool fat, a scent that lingers on the body. Over it sits a wool cap pulled low for warmth. Everyone wore one, from nobles in manor houses to herders in small huts. Hair held heat, but uncovered heads lost it quickly. In harsh winters, even children slept in caps, sometimes with ties under the chin. Small items made a big difference. Socks or hose stayed on, often patched so many times they were more stitched than cloth. Gloves were worn indoors as well, leaving fingers free to manage the fire. Medieval illustrations even show people sleeping fully dressed, with shoes nearby in case the roof leaked. One unusual account from a 15th century monk describes a family hanging their work clothes above the bed so the smell of sweat and leather reminded them of honest labor. It may have been devotion, or simply practicality, as warm air dried damp garments. Either way, it shows how work and rest were closely linked. No one here treats sleep as indulgence. It is only a pause in the effort to survive. Still, there is quiet beauty in these habits. The mother checks the door latch. The father whispers a prayer. Ashes are spread over the coals, saving a spark for morning. The children murmur softly, their voices like snow falling outside. Old customs say some families placed rosemary or garlic near the bed to ward off sickness and spirits. The smell was sharp, earthy, and comforting. In a world with little medicine, and where unseen forces explained illness, such practices offered reassurance. Belief and necessity were separated by little more than the thin blanket covering them. Researchers note that medieval life often blended prayer with useful superstition. A cross drawn in ash on the hearthstone, a quiet appeal to Saint Blay or Saint Bridge, a pinch of salt tossed into the fire for luck. These acts gave people a sense of control during long nights. Without central heating, faith itself served as warmth. The bed settles into stillness. Only linen shifting and steady breathing disturb the quiet. Outside, frost creeps over stone, forming pale lines that shine in moonlight. Inside, warmth gathers wherever it can, clinging to wool and skin. The air carries the smell of peat and lanolin, and beneath it, a faint sweetness from dried herbs hung near the beams. Archaeological findings suggest lavender, mint, or wormwood were sometimes tucked into bedding. People believed these plants drove away fleas and freshened the air. Whether effective or not, their scent likely brought a memory of summer into the hardest part of winter. It was a medieval equivalent of a comfort light, delicate, yet reassuring. One notable regional practice in Scandinavia involved placing a small iron blade beneath the bed to ward off trolls or night wanderers. In certain areas of France, people hung a rosary from the bedpost. In rural England, some left a cup of water near the window for roaming spirits, hoping they would not stay out of jealousy for the living. Historians still debate how deeply these beliefs were held, but their significance lies in what they show. People sought calm as much as they sought warmth. You can imagine yourself there, lying quietly beneath a thick blanket, a woolen cap pulled down, the smell of herbs and ash lingering in the air. Above you, the roof creaks softly. Cold brushes your nose, but the rest of your body remains comfortably warm. The darkness is heavy, yet it feels kind, filled with unspoken protection. Some scholars suggest these nighttime rituals influenced how medieval people dreamed. The blend of belief, heat, and fear of spirits likely gave dreams strong imagery. Fire in a dream meant good fortune. Falling snow signaled trouble ahead. A clear conscience, they believed, led to peaceful sleep. You can almost see a family rising in the morning, sharing and interpreting their dreams like sacred text. You shift beneath the blanket and listen. A goat stirs in the corner, its hooves tapping softly on the floor. A few sparks jump from the hearth, causing shadows to flicker. Outside, a dog barks once, then grows quiet. You take a slow breath, air filling your lungs with the taste of earth and age. The linen against your skin cools as you loosen. The herbal scent fades. Sleep comes gradually, settling over you like another layer of cloth. Beyond the cottage, the world may be frozen and vast, but within these small shared walls, there is warmth, safety, and a delicate sense of grace. The room feels tighter as daylight gives way again to a long winter evening. Smoke hangs thick in the air, mixed with hay and the presence of animals. You move on the straw bed, and a low grunt answers from the corner. You are not alone, and you never were. In medieval homes, night was shared not only with family, but with animals that provided both heat and survival. Records from memorials and church documents show that peasants often kept livestock indoors during winter. A cow, pigs, chickens, perhaps a goat or dog, all lived within the same space. This may seem odd today, but for people guided by seasonal cycles, it was sensible and essential. A single cow could release as much heat as several small fires, its slow breathing adding a steady presence to the room. This arrangement was intentional. The family's bed was placed near the hearth, while animals stayed in a slightly lower area closer to the door, where straw and waste could be removed easily. Sometimes wooden dividers marked the space, but often a simple mound of hay was enough. Heat rose upward, creating a shared balance of breath and warmth. Interestingly, the animals adapted to this routine. At night, pigs settled down. Cows chewed cud in a half-asleep state, and the dog curled against the wall with its nose tucked in. Every sound was known and comforting, part of the household's nightly rhythm. Children grew up seeing animals not just as possessions, but as fellow companions. A 13th-century observer once noted that a cow's breath in winter was as valuable as fire. This was not exaggeration. Those who slept near their animals were often the ones who endured severe winters. The boundary between barn and home faded until both became one. Researchers have found that floors were sometimes built with a slight slope so waste and melted snow could drain toward the door. Fresh straw was added daily, stacking layers of warmth like bedding. Over time, these layers packed down, forming a thick surface that held heat. It was not clean, but it was effective. Life carried the smell of soil, smoke, and manure, yet it was a living scent, not a lifeless one. A Scandinavian folk tradition records people thanking their cows aloud before sleep, recognizing the warmth they offered. Some even gave a handful of grain before extinguishing the fire, murmuring wishes for continued milk and heat. Whether driven by gratitude or belief, it reflects the close bond between humans and animals. The dog played an even stronger role. It guarded the home, but it also provided warmth. A dog curled at the foot of the bed offered comfort beyond protection. Folktales speak of dogs sensing danger or spirits before people did, their growls seen as warnings against unseen threats. In reality, their sharp hearing detected sounds humans missed, but belief and practicality blended easily at night. Accounts from rural Europe also mention chickens kept indoors, not only for warmth but for safety. Foxes and thieves roamed freely, and a chicken inside was one less lost. Their soft clucking became another familiar sound, like a child's breathing. Archaeology shows that barns and homes were often linked, sometimes sharing walls. Heat from the animals passed through stone, softening the cold. In better-off homes, a low wall separated people from livestock, while in poorer huts, animals rested wherever space allowed. The result was a constant exchange of warmth, breath, and scent that bound all living beings together. Historians do not fully agree on how this affected health. Some argue disease spread more easily, while others believe long-term exposure strengthened resistance. Regardless, survival showed the system worked. The warmth of a cow outweighed the discomfort of its smell. You can picture the flow of such a night. A cow shifts, hooves scraping stone. The dog exhales. A child closest to the animals turns in sleep, a hand reaching toward the sound. The air is dense, yet moving, carrying heat and breath that feels alive. You listen and the house becomes a single organism, breathing together. A Welsh legend tells of families who believed the spirit of the home was shared by all within it, human and animal alike. When an animal died, people spoke softly to the fire, asking it to guide the creature's warmth onward. This may seem overly tender now, but for those entirely dependent on their animals, it was logical. You adjust slightly, sensing faint vibrations through the straw. It is not unpleasant. The air hums with life, warmth rising gently toward your face. You smell hay and wool, smoke and dung, scents that cling to every piece of clothing. In this world, smell is not an enemy, it proves life. Some anthropologists suggest that sleeping among animals reshaped the idea of comfort itself. People became used to warmth that lived and sounds that reassured rather than disturbed. Silence would have felt strange, even threatening. In the coldest weeks, the absence of animal noise was a warning sign of illness, or worse, of death. As you close your eyes once more, you sense the quiet connection of shared existence. Each exhale brushes against another's inhale. The stone walls hold warmth, and for a few hours, the outside world might as well vanish. Inside, there is heat, breath, and the steady rhythm of survival. The fire flickers again, illuminating the curved backs of sleeping animals, the bundled family, and the rough walls. Everything glows in shades of gold and brown. This is not luxury, but something deeper, the warmth of living beings holding one another through the night. You breathe slowly, the scent of hay and smoke thick in your lungs, letting the rhythm of shared breath carry you back to sleep. The cottage exhales. You exhale with it, carried by a world where warmth is communal and life is shared with every heartbeat. Morning light seeps through the narrow window slit like a thin blade of gold, barely piercing the lingering smoke. You open your eyes to frost glittering on the window substitute, a stretched film of oiled parchment rather than real glass. It softens the outside world into a gentle haze of light and shadow. In this dim glow, you realize how fragile the barrier is between warmth and the vast cold beyond. Peasants commonly used oiled cloth, parchment, or animal bladders as window coverings. True glass existed in towns and monasteries but was rare and expensive. The thin material let in light while reducing the sharpest winds, though it could not keep the cold out completely. The result was a delicate balance of light and draft, a compromise between vision and warmth. A faint breeze slips through cracks around the frame, ghost-like on your skin. The family stirs, murmuring in half-sleep. The father rises first, his breath visible in the cold air. He presses a cloth into a crevice where frost has seeped in. His hands are rough, red, and split from cold and labor. Archaeological findings show that stone cottage windows were often no wider than a man's forearm. Smaller openings kept more heat inside. In summer, shutters might be left slightly ajar, but in winter, every gap threatened warmth. Thick, uneven wooden shutters were pulled tight at night and fastened with iron hooks. Sometimes straw was packed along the edges to block drafts. Primitive as it sounds, these measures were effective enough to keep families alive through the longest nights. The oiled parchment itself created a special light quality. Sunlight did not pour directly but diffused softly, painting the interior in amber and honey tones. Dim but warm, it transformed the room into a permanent twilight, softening the harsh edges of stone and wood. This muted glow may have made winter more bearable, turning the interior into a place of quiet endurance. In some northern regions, stretched animal bladders, often from pigs or sheep, served as windows. Treated with oil or resin, they became watertight and flexible. While historians debate their insulation value, These translucent barriers shaped the mood of medieval homes, letting daylight in like a memory rather than illumination. You imagine standing by that small window, looking out onto a white morning. Frost crusts the fields, trees stand still, each branch edged with ice. The faint toll of a distant church bell carries across the frozen air. Inside, survival versus exposure is separated by only a few inches of stretched parchment and a silent hope for calm weather. Rural chronicles note that peasants sometimes sealed window edges with animal fat in the coldest weeks. The fat hardened, plugging gaps and keeping drafts out. When slightly warmed by the fire, it released a faint odor that mingled with smoke and straw, effective, though not pleasant. The mother moves toward the light, lifting the youngest child. The child reaches a small hand toward the frost-patterned window, marveling at the shapes that bloom like flowers, feathers, stars, or curling vines. In sparsely decorated homes, this fleeting display may have been the only ornamentation of the season. Researchers suggest that window size and placement reveal medieval attitudes toward light. Large openings signaled wealth and comfort, while small ones indicated thrift and humility. In peasant homes, light was precious because it came with sacrifice. To stay warm, dimness was accepted. To see the world, cold was endured. Life was always a negotiation. Evidence from preserved northern European cottages shows cloth nailed along walls beside windows, functioning as makeshift curtains. Usually coarse linen or burlap, these fabrics trapped air and blocked drafts. Dark dyes absorb sunlight. Though minimal in effect, every bit of warmth mattered. You feel that careful balance now. The draft cools your cheek while your back stays warm from the rekindled fire. The air carries faint resin from parchment, smoke from wood, and the salt of drying sweat, a blend both harsh and familiar, defining the medieval home. Folklore held that the whistle of wind through window cracks was a warning from unseen spirits. Families sometimes tied bells or ribbons near openings so movement would be heard but spirits kept out. The superstition seems quaint, yet as you listen to the real wind tonight, it feels alive, purposeful, as if winter itself were speaking. You sit quietly watching the light shift on the walls. Each moment hangs between inside and outside, warmth and frost, silence and breath. The family prepares for another day of labor, but for now they linger in this in-between hour, caught in the fragile glow. Closing your eyes again, you recognize these imperfect windows as metaphors for medieval life. They let in just enough light to see, never enough to forget the cold beyond. You breathe in, feeling the draft on your skin, reminded that sometimes the smallest crack between worlds sustains both. The day fades early, swallowed by winter dusk. You lie awake, watching shadows stretch as the fire dies. Cold presses gently but insistently, a steady reminder that night rules half the year. In this darkness, time slows, measured by breath and heartbeat rather than clocks. Medieval diaries and early church writings note that people rarely slept in one long stretch. Instead, they practiced segmented sleep, beginning shortly after sunset and lasting a few hours until midnight. Then came a period of quiet wakefulness before the second sleep carried them to dawn. This pattern was so familiar that phrases like first sleep and second rest appeared casually in letters and confessions. During this in-between time, the cottage became a place of subdued activity. The father might rise to stir the fire, check on the animals, or step outside into the cold. The mother could nurse an infant or kneel by the hearth in whispered prayer. Some used the quiet hours to mend tools, twist new rope, or engage in low conversations before returning to bed. It was not restlessness, but a natural rhythm. Night had its own deliberate routine. Curiously, this midnight interval also offered time for reflection and intimacy. Couples often spoke softly, sharing thoughts never voiced by daylight. Old songs called it the watch between sleeps, a small, private pocket of time. One clerical account even described it as the hour when confessions were whispered, not to priests, but to the stillness itself. Archaeological and medical research confirms that without artificial light, human sleep naturally fell into this two-phase pattern. Candlelight and dim lamps offered little resistance to the pull of darkness. Guided by circadian rhythms, people followed this natural flow, spending more time in bed than we do today, not sleeping continuously, but existing in a half-conscious state of warmth, thought, and rest. Picture the family in this soft hour between sleeps. The fire glows faintly, casting gentle amber light on faces. The mother lies on her side, one arm curled around the youngest child. The father sits at the hearth, feeding twigs into the embers, each crackle soft as paper tearing. Above, frost melts and refreezes on the roof beams. A 14th-century sermon described this mid-sleep wakefulness as an ideal time for prayer, when God was thought to listen most closely. Peasants murmured small devotions for mild weather, strong crops, or the safety of traveling kin. These whispered hopes felt as essential as warmth itself. You can almost hear them now, low voices weaving through smoky air. Perhaps the father prays to Saint Bridge, patron of hearth and home, or Saint Nicholas, protector of children. The mother hums softly, a wordless tune offering comfort. Children shift in their sleep, their soft breaths blending with the sighing wind outside. Researchers remain divided on whether this segmented sleep made people more rested or more weary. Some suggest 2 sleeps allowed for deeper, more vivid dreams. Others think it reflected exhaustion and harsh conditions. Whatever the truth, this rhythm reflects a deeply human connection to the natural flow of life. You move slightly, listening to the cottage breathe. Warmth rises from the fire, but corners remain cold enough for frost to linger. Animals stir in the shadows, hooves rustling straw. The scent of wood smoke and earth fills the air. Outside, snow begins falling again, each flake settling silently on the thatch. It is in this suspended moment that imagination awakens. Medieval people often spoke of dreaming twice. First dreams shaped by hunger, fatigue, and heat. Second dreams belonging to the spirit, influenced by prayers or thoughts from the waking interval. Some believed that post-second sleep dreams revealed one's truest self. Alpine folklore suggested that to glimpse the future, one should wake between sleeps, place a hand on the heart, and stare into the last coal of the fire, which might show a brief image of the coming season. Whether superstition or not, the story shows the meaning people found in the night. You lie quietly, halfway between waking and dreaming. The cottage pulses with life. Wood creaks softly in the fire's warmth. A small draft brushes your face with the scent of ash. The father settles back into bed, the floor sighing beneath him. A deep, almost sacred silence follows. In this hour before the second sleep, you feel the flow of medieval time, unrushed, unmeasured by clocks, moving like breath, guided by light and darkness. The night encourages reflection, not resistance. Your eyes grow heavy. The fire flickers once, then steadies. The air cools, but not sharply. The quiet returns, thick and complete. Outside, snow continues to fall, softening the world until even thought quiets. You drift back towards sleep with calm acceptance, the house breathing, the fire glowing, the long medieval night folding around you. You wake again sometime before dawn, though dream and morning blur together. The air is still and heavy, the fire long cold. Something tickles your neck under the blanket, brushed away instinctively. The cottage, for all its warmth, is alive in ways best left unconsidered. Medieval chroniclers and physicians documented beds teeming with life. Fleas, lice, and mites thrived in straw, clothing seams, and blankets. Cleanliness was limited by water and soap scarcity. Families might bathe only a few times a year, usually on holidays. Between these rare occasions, the body adapted. A 15th-century medical text notes that smoke from peat fires may have kept biting insects at bay. True or not, it reflects how people understood their environment. Smoke was warmth, preservation, and invisible protection. You lift the blanket, the familiar smell rises, straw, wool, sweat, and smoke. Not pleasant but recognizable. Straw crackles as you move, a sound once comforting. Over time, bedding flattened, stems breaking into dust. New straw was added every few weeks, creating layers of past nights. When floors were cleaned, old bedding went to animals or the garden, returning warmth to soil that fed grain. Children sometimes helped beat bedding outdoors, the hearth's smoke cleansing the emptied space. This process left the interior smelling of earth and ash, a scent of renewal. The cycle of infestation and cleaning repeated endlessly, part of life rather than something to conquer. There is a resilience in this acceptance. To modern sensibilities, it might seem unbearable, but to them it was simply another texture of existence. The body adapted, skin grew tougher, the itch faded into the background. The idea of comfort in the past was very different. Survival dulled the sense of disgust. A story from a 13th century French folk tale tells of a farmer who sprinkled herbs and ashes in his bed to keep away uninvited guests. In some regions, people used dried mint or tansy for the same purpose, believing the strong scents would repel pests. Others lined their beds with fern fronds, which provided softness and a faint, bitter aroma that insects disliked. Whether it worked or not, it made going to bed feel like an act of care. Archaeologists studying preserved peat bogs and ancient sites have found beds made of layers of straw mixed with moss and even seaweed. Each material had a purpose. Moss absorbed moisture, seaweed added springiness, and straw provided structure. Together, these layers created a small, living ecosystem beneath every sleeper. You can almost feel it, the rustling beneath your body, the faint scratch at your ankle, the way the straw shifts with each breath. Sleep was never deep or still. It was a negotiation between exhaustion and irritation. Yet people still dreamed, woke, and lived full lives on these imperfect beds. There was a certain dark humor in how they handled these inconveniences. In some areas, fleas were jokingly called the poor man's jewelry, and finding a few in your blanket meant that life was still thriving. Laughter, it seems, was a luxury freely available. Historians debate whether such living conditions shortened life expectancy or simply created a different standard of health. Some argue constant exposure built resilience, others say it wore the body down. The truth is probably somewhere in between. Endurance was both their weakness and their strength. Consider how these people woke each day to familiar annoyances, the scratching, the shifting straw, the tiny movements of unseen creatures at night, and still carried on with labor without complaint. The body adapted to discomfort, just as the mind adapted to the fear of cold. A superstition from the British Isles even suggested that fleas could carry away illness if allowed to bite freely for one night each month. The idea was that impurities in the blood would leave with them, a grim optimism, transforming misery into medicine. Belief or need, it brought comfort. You turn toward the fire, now only a faint heap of ash. The room is dim, but alive with subtle motions, the soft twitch of a sleeping animal, the whisper of straw, the faint tapping of frost melting and refreezing. This is the pulse of the cottage, imperfect, yet enduring. A low sound rises from the corner, a pig stirring in its sleep, briefly warming the air. You breathe in smoke and life and feel a quiet gratitude. Even imperfections carry warmth, even discomfort proves life persists. Settling into the straw, the itch becomes part of the night's rhythm. Sleep is not absence but surrender, and the house holds you, alive in every small detail. The cold deepens. Air slipping through the door feels sharp. Near the hearth, someone stirs, lifting a small clay jug. Before seeing it, you smell ale, sweet and sour, a quiet comfort in a world without modern warmth, a liquid blanket for the soul. Medieval peasants rarely drank water straight from wells or streams, especially in winter. Instead, they brewed weak ale, known as small beer, low in alcohol but safe and nourishing. Barley and oats left in the brew added faint sweetness and body to an otherwise meager diet. You imagine the father seated by the ashes, sipping from the jug. The ale is warm from the fire's memory, flat but soothing, spreading gentle heat through his chest. He passes it to the mother, who drinks quietly before returning it. Children will have their turn as well, drinking not for pleasure but survival. Records show some families brewed at home from whatever they could find, barley, oats, rye, even dried peas, resulting in a cloudy, thick, and slightly sour drink. It might not win awards, but it kept bodies moving and the cold at bay. The scent of yeast and malt mingled year-round with smoke and sweat. Brewing was not leisure but necessity. Households guarded their supply, measuring portions carefully. Sharing a drink before bed became a quiet act of communion, an unspoken acknowledgement that life, though harsh, still contained small kindnesses. Travelers and monks noted that ale did more than nourish. It softened conversation, warmed bones, and brought laughter when possible. After long days in frozen fields, even a mouthful was a small luxury. Some peasants added honey or herbs like yarrow or bog myrtle when they could, changing the taste and creating the illusion of strength. Some believed these ingredients offered protection against fever or melancholy. Communal drinking softened hierarchies. The same ale the father drank could be tasted by the children. Warmth and comfort spread through the smoky room. You can imagine holding that small clay jug, feeling faint warmth in your hands, tasting life in every swallow. The father leans back, the mother smiles softly, and the children drowse, rosy-cheeked in the dim light. A superstition suggested spilling a few drops of ale on the hearth would please household spirits and keep the fire alive through the night. Warmth was a gift worth acknowledging, whether from God, luck, or human hands. Scholars debate whether alcohol in peasant life was a comfort or a crutch. Some say it dulled hardship, others see it as cultural resilience, a ritual connecting labor, faith, and rest. Both are true. Long nights and biting cold made anything that eased suffering a mercy. The dog shifts beside the fire, paw twitching in dreams. Life, in all its small discomforts, endures. The father sets the jug aside and lies back down, wrapping an arm around his wife. The faint scent of ale lingers in the air, mingling with smoke and wool. Outside, the wind has softened. Even the frost seems to pause, attentive. You feel the lingering warmth of the ale spreading through your chest, even as the room cools. The heat does not last long, but it leaves a gentler sensation, a calm hum settling in your ribs. The world feels smaller, more contained. Outside darkness may stretch endlessly, but inside there is still ritual, still meaning. The fire fades to embers. The family breathes slowly, bodies heavy with exhaustion yet carrying a residual warmth. For a moment, time feels suspended, thick, like the last wisp of steam rising from the jug. You close your eyes and listen to the quiet that follows, not empty, but full of presence. The warmth of ale, the weight of blankets, and the soft chorus of breath merge into a steady pulse. Sleep comes naturally, not as escape, but as agreement with the night. A soft exhale carries centuries of gratitude for every small comfort that helped humans endure the cold. The night folds quietly, immense and still. The cottage seems smaller, tightly encased in frost. The air has changed, brittle and precise, signaling the harshest part of the cold. The fire glows faintly, a trembling heart beneath its ash cover. In the dimness, a sound arises that is neither wind nor wood, the faint murmur of prayer. Historical records show that medieval peasants often prayed before bed, motivated not only by faith but by fear. Night brought uncertainty. Darkness held physical and spiritual threats alike. A freezing wind could take life as quickly as illness, and unseen dangers seemed to lurk just beyond the firelight. Closing one's eyes without a blessing felt reckless. The father, sitting upright on the straw bed, makes the sign of the cross. His fingers are cracked, nails blackened from work, but the gesture is deliberate. His lips move silently, repeating words passed down from parents and priests. He prays for the fire to hold, for the walls to stand, for the children to wake safely in the morning. Bedtime prayers often blended with folk charms. A whispered plea to the Virgin might be followed by a rhyme against frost or spirits. A cross on the hearthstone, a pinch of salt by the door, or an iron knife under the bed were common protections. To modern eyes, this seems superstitious. To them, it was balance, faith for the soul, precaution for the body. In Northern Europe, families invoked Saint Brigid, guardian of the hearth, believed to bless fires on cold nights. In Italy and France, Saint Nicholas or Saint Genevieve were called upon for protection. Every village had its patron, rituals, and small acts of resistance against the reach of darkness. One parish record notes a family carving a cross into the beam above their bed each winter, renewing it yearly, believing it absorbed the cold and kept it away from their bodies. Traces of these crosses remain faintly visible today. Scholars continue to debate whether these nightly rituals were driven more by faith or habit. In a world where both illness and storms threatened survival, spiritual and practical safety were inseparable. Every gesture mattered. Every spoken word offered comfort. Prayer became warmth made from breath. You hear the mother's low, rhythmic voice, reciting Latin she may not fully understand. In Manus tuas, Domini, commendo spiritum meum. Her words fill the room, another form of light. The children murmur, imitating her, hands crossing themselves with sleepy devotion. A 14th-century household remedy even instructed saying a blessing while facing each corner of the room before sleep, symbolically sealing the home from evil. The act mattered less for efficacy than for the calm it brought. The cottage itself became a prayer. The wind outside sighs through the thatch, making the mother pause. She glances toward the door, catching the reflection of embers. For a moment, she listens, then whispers a line from village memory, not scripture. Keep out the wandering cold. Keep safe the sleeping souls. There is something profoundly human in this combination of reverence and fear. Living close to nature's edge required faith to be both gentle and fierce. It was not abstract, it was survival spoken aloud. Archaeological studies of charms in medieval homes reveal small tokens tucked into walls or thresholds. Bones, carved symbols, coins, even children's shoes. Hidden not for wealth, but protection, each a private prayer, sealing safety into the home. The family's breathing slows. Prayers are complete. Words drift upward with the smoke. The fire pops softly in response. Though the cold remains, the room carries a subtle peace, a warmth born not of fire or flesh, but of belief itself. Some villages held that angels passed through homes at midnight, touching those who prayed sincerely. Even as a modern observer, the thought is comforting. You imagine that unseen presence moving through the room, brushing walls, pausing at the hearth. Prayers linger like fragrance. The fire steadies, fortified by devotion. Sleep returns quiet and deep. Outside, frost thickens, but inside, a fragile warmth persists, spun from breath, hope, and habit. Dreams carry the faint scent of smoke and candle wax. The last sound fades, prayer dissolving into silence, a lullaby of devotion and necessity. The night passes slowly. Morning arrives not with sunlight, but as a dim gray glow through the parchment window, heavy with mist and cold. You wake before the others, body stiff from hours curled for warmth. Every joint protests, every breath clouds in the air. Yet there is comfort in the stillness, as if the world has slowed to match your rhythm. Historians note that sleep in the Middle Ages was not luxury, but survival. Peasants slept to conserve energy. Winter demanded endurance. With daylight fleeting, surrendering to darkness was an act of preservation, not leisure. You sit up slightly, the blanket sliding from your shoulders. The cold rushes in instantly, biting your skin. The air feels sharp, almost like knives. The fire has died down, leaving only pale ash and a few dark stones still holding faint heat. Your breath rises in clouds, a visible sign of life in a house that seems nearly frozen. Interestingly, the body's response to such cold was itself a form of survival. Historical studies show that constant low temperatures slowed metabolism and reduced hunger, allowing people to endure longer stretches with little food. Sleep, in this sense, became nature's rationing system, a way for the poor to stretch meager resources through harsh winters. You glance toward the family, still asleep. The parents lie close together, their hands entwined even in dreams. The children have burrowed deep into the straw, faces hidden beneath wool caps. Their breath mingles with that of the animals behind the low partition, rising in faint mist. The entire room seems to breathe as one, a single exhale of endurance. A 15th-century monk once described sleep as a small death that saves. He observed that peasants in winter seemed to live half their lives asleep, not from fatigue, but from necessity. Staying awake too long would burn precious energy and bring hunger sooner. Sleep, then, became a form of practical wisdom. You lie back for a moment, listening to the strange quiet that follows a freezing night. Outside, no birds call, no footsteps echo. The world waits, heavy under frost. Inside, your heartbeat sounds louder than anything else. It's easy to see how people once filled this silence with meaning, believing spirits passed through it, whispering between breaths. One Alpine superstition claimed that dreaming of fire during the coldest nights meant the body was truly freezing, a warning from the dream itself. Whether true or not, it shows how closely life and imagination were tied to survival. Researchers still debate how medieval people understood rest. Some argue sleep was sacred, a moment when body and soul approached God. Others see it as practical, simply a pause before labor resumed. Both perspectives suggest a certain reverence. To close one's eyes under such conditions, and wake again, was no small triumph. The father stirs now, rubbing his face with calloused hands. He reaches for the hearth, finding only ash, sighing softly. Without a word, he stands, pulls on frost-stiff boots, and steps outside. Moments later, he returns with a few wood splinters and a small sack of dried peat. The routine is automatic, part prayer, part labor. As the fire crackles to life, faint orange light spreads across the walls, soothing in its rhythm. The mother pulls the blanket tighter around the children. Her pale face catches the light. She wakes calmly, not in complaint but acceptance. Peasants often began mornings in darkness, tending fires and animals before dawn. The coldest hours, just before sunrise, were often the most dangerous, capable of biting fingers before anyone realized. Still, they moved with quiet persistence, shaped by years of repetition. A line from a 14th-century prayer book reads, "He who endures the cold endures God's trial." It captures the spirit perfectly. Endurance was both physical and moral, a devotion expressed through suffering. Warmth was not given, it was earned. The fire grows stronger, painting the stones in amber. The dog stretches before curling closer to the flames. The goat shakes itself awake, the soft clatter of hooves filling the room. The smell of smoke mixes with the faint sweetness of peat. Life returns slowly to the cottage. The father breaks a crust of frozen bread, warming it near the fire before sharing it. No one speaks at first. Faces glow faintly, eyes half closed, caught between fatigue and gratitude. To eat, to breathe, to feel warmth, these are prayers answered without words. Perhaps, you think, sleep was not escape but transformation. The body shuts down to protect itself. The mind drifts inward to forget the cold. Waking becomes resurrection. Each morning is a small miracle. Light brightens slightly through the window, revealing frost glittering on the floor stones. The air still stings the nose but feels gentler. The fire crackles, the house expands in its warmth, and the long night gives way to a new day. You close your eyes one final moment, feeling the faint warmth against your skin. Sleep has done its work, carrying you through hunger, cold, and winter's stillness. In this stone house, survival is quiet, steady, and profoundly human. By mid-morning, the world outside is dazzling white. Snow covers every path, and silence slows even thought. Inside, however, the day hums with small sounds, the clink of iron, the thud of a log on the hearth, the low moo of a cow. Life is present in rhythm, not emptiness. You rest against the wall, listening. Each sound is magnified, the drip of melted frost, the faint creak of ropes, the sigh of breath through chapped lips. These noises form the music of a medieval village, the song of endurance under snow. Travelers noted that winter nights in the countryside carried their own soundscape. No carriages, no distant roads, no hum of industry. The world was reduced to essentials: wind, wood, and animal voices. Human ears became sensitive to every nuance. Weather could be read in the shifting rafters or a dog's altered breathing. People spoke of layered sounds in the night. The first was obvious: wind and movement. The second belonged to the house itself, timbers contracting in cold. The third was softer, the hush when even wind froze. In that silence, many believed they could hear God thinking. You can almost hear it now, life contained within thick walls. The father hums while sharpening a blade, the mother stirs thin porridge, the spoon scraping softly. Children play with bits of straw, inventing stories. Every sound feels intimate, deliberate. Archaeological records suggest sound behaved differently in these homes. Low ceilings and smoke-filled air softened echoes, wrapping each noise in warmth. Conversations rarely traveled far. The next cottage could be invisible, inaudible in snow. Each family existed in its own sphere, enclosed by stone and frost. In rural France, one tradition placed a small bell on the door latch at night, a gentle mark of presence and protection. The gentle tinkling sound served both as alarm and reassurance. If it rang sharply, it might signal that wind had pushed the door open, or that something larger, a wild animal or intruder, had attempted to enter. More often, it chimed softly when the door shifted with a draft, a quiet reminder that the world outside was alive. Researchers note that medieval villagers were especially attuned to such subtle signals. The crack of ice warned of danger to livestock. A silent barn often meant sick animals. Even human sleep adapted to this environment. One ear remained half alert. Sleeping with one ear open was not a metaphor but a survival habit. Listen now to the delicate interplay between silence and sound. The fire snaps, sending up a small burst of sparks. A mother laughs softly as one lands near her hand. A goat bleats in response, as if part of the conversation. Then calm returns, and the house itself seems to pause in thought. A 17th-century folklore note describes villagers interpreting certain noises as weather signs. Loud fire pops predicted frost. A creaking roof meant snow. The drip of water in the night was linked to Thor. These sounds were never feared. They were read as dialogue between the elements and the home. As you listen, old instincts awaken. The cold itself carries a sound, fragile like thin glass touched by the wind. Each breath contributes to the quiet rhythm of winter. The father hums again, a simple repetition of low tones, perhaps a field song or half-remembered hymn. The fire's crackle blends with his voice until they are inseparable. The mother joins briefly, her softer tone lilting. The children smile but remain silent. It is not a song to perform, but one to inhabit. Historians suggest these household sounds acted as emotional anchors, offering comfort and structuring thought and labor. Silence, too, held meaning, not emptiness, but peace in a life of constant work. Leaning against the cold wall, eyes half closed, you sense the house's heartbeat. Fire, breath, shuffling animals, soft voices. Outside, the wind brushes snow with a distant whisper. Inside, life moves steadily. The longer you listen, the more the house feels like a single living organism. Its people, walls, animals, and fire share one slow rhythm, a rhythm that sustained them through harsh winters. Survival came not only from fire and food but from the deep awareness that they were never truly alone in the dark. As the fire brightens, shadows dance along the walls in sync with the wind outside. The house groans under frost, and even stone seems to speak. Every element communicates, if one listens closely. Closing your eyes, the sounds settle over you, soft and patient. The cottage hums like an ancient lullaby, and for the first time, the cold seems gentle. Night stretches across the land, defining winter's rhythm. The family gathers near the hearth, the fire small but steady. Children lean against their mother, half asleep, while the father mends a strap by the firelight. Smoke and wool scent the air, and love manifests quietly, in gestures, not words. Medieval homes offered little privacy. Families shared the same space for work, sleep, and life, so closeness at night brought comfort and challenge. Marriage was less about whispered vows or candlelit rooms and more about survival, companionship, and sharing warmth. Many peasant couples saw marriage as sacred but practical, partners in labor first, lovers second. Nightfall, however, offered tenderness amid necessity. Shared warmth was intimacy. The narrow, rough bed became a place of trust. To love someone was to help them survive. 13th and 14th century customs dictated practical sleeping arrangements. Parents with the youngest child in the main bed, older children nearby, servants near the door. Newlyweds sometimes shared space with a sibling until they could afford privacy. A court record tells of a young couple creating a curtain of patched cloth around their bed, calling it a house within a house, a rare claim to solitude. Such accounts reveal humanity's insistence on quiet tenderness despite crowded conditions. Historians debate whether exhaustion muted affection or whether hardship deepened bonds. Letters and folk songs suggest that scarcity made gestures more meaningful and words rare but powerful. The mother gazes across the fire at her husband. No words are exchanged, yet their eyes convey years of labor, winters endured, and shared life. Her soft smile radiates warmth beyond the flames. He returns it silently, continuing his work. In this exchange lies the house's life. European folklore often links fire to love. Couples pledge themselves before the hearth, believing flames sealed bonds. If shadows touched in firelight, souls were thought to intertwine. With priests rare and formal ceremonies uncommon, these acts were both sacred and binding. A 14th-century French poem illustrates peasant love, sharing a hearth, dividing bread, surviving together. These gestures were the vows that mattered. The quiet energy of care is tangible. The father passes a bowl, the mother tucks blankets around children. In this life, love is performed repeatedly, becoming habit. Archaeological evidence, carved initials, intertwined symbols, hearts etched in wood, reveals that even in poverty, small acts of devotion left lasting traces. Proof that affection managed to leave its mark even among stone walls and straw floors. In parts of Eastern Europe, a curious belief held that sleeping apart could bring misfortune. Couples who did not share a bed regularly risked losing warmth, both physical and emotional. The notion was practical, yet it also revealed an emotional truth. Closeness was survival, separation brought cold. Now, you hear the gentle sounds of the family, the crackle of the fire, the rustle of straw, the quiet breathing of those half asleep. Everything moves in a single rhythm, each heartbeat merging with the next. Even the cottage seems alive with intimacy. Firelight touches the mother's face, making her cheek glow, while the father leans closer, not to speak, but simply to be present. Night deepens and the house grows still. Outside, frost spreads across the fields. Inside, the closeness of bodies generates its own warmth, invisible yet undeniable. It is the warmth of endurance and affection combined. Fire and wool kept bodies alive, but love, even in its smallest gestures, protected the spirit. The house seems to breathe as if it knows the secret. Warmth begins with touch, and touch begins with care. You close your eyes, hearing the faint meeting of two hands under the blanket, a small gesture, almost imperceptible, yet capable of outlasting the harshest winter. The night is quiet again, carrying a gentle weight. In the dim light, a small figure stirs, a child, no more than 5 or 6, crawling closer to the warmth. The mother shifts, creating space, and the child nestles beside her, sighing softly. Records from medieval parishes show children often slept near their parents, sometimes even in the same bed. Separate rooms were a luxury, and separate mattresses were rare. Families shared what they had, layering straw and blankets into a common nest. Closeness was necessity, not indulgence. The smaller the circle, the warmer the sleep. Children had their place in the bed following an unwritten order, the youngest between parents, older ones along the edges. Occasionally, a smaller straw pallet on the floor would be shared, covered with cloaks. It was practical rather than formal, the essential rule: no one slept alone. In harsh winters, isolation was dangerous. A traveling friar once described finding children tucked beneath a hen on a freezing night, a vivid reminder of the lengths parents went to protect warmth. You can picture it, children huddled under their parents' arms, exchanging warmth. Their light, rhythmic breathing fills the room like a living lullaby. The eldest child clings to a scrap of cloth, the middle one presses near the goat for extra heat, and the youngest blinks at glowing embers before drifting back to sleep. Parents lie still, exhausted but vigilant, ready to comfort at the first rustle or cry. This was love in its quietest, most necessary form. Historians note that shared sleeping taught children cooperation from birth. They learned to move carefully, to fit themselves around others, to awaken without disturbing anyone. Family life followed a literal rhythm, breaths and movements repeated night after night. An English manor record mentions a fine imposed on a peasant family when a child fell into the hearth. Harsh as it sounds, it highlights the danger of the hearth. Parents kept children close, not just for warmth, but for safety. One spark could turn sleep into disaster. Songs and verses also helped. One old rhyme begins, "Sleep, my heart, till the frost is gone, and angels guard the fire till dawn." These words offered comfort and courage, promising that the dark would pass, the fire would endure, and parents' arms would shield children from the world. You can almost hear a mother humming this softly, her voice steady as a heartbeat. Even the animals settle as the melody fades. Historians debate medieval perceptions of childhood. Some argue children were treated as small adults, expected to work and obey. Others see homes like this as spaces where affection flowed naturally, expressed through protection and closeness. The truth lies somewhere in between. Survival was a family effort, and love was both work and reward. In Scandinavia, parents gave each child a smooth stone warmed in the hearth at bedtime. Wrapped in cloth, the stone comforted the child through the night, a tangible piece of fire's warmth. This family had no such luxury, yet their shared body heat achieved the same effect. The children sleep peacefully, the youngest murmuring before falling deeper into dreams. The mother brushes hair from the child's forehead, the father's arm remains outstretched, a quiet barrier against the outside world. Parents instinctively check their children's breathing at night, a precaution born from constant threat. Sudden infant death was a real danger. Cold, hunger, and illness were ever present. Hearing a child breathe was reassurance enough to rest again. Outside, snow piles up, the wind presses against the door but cannot enter. Inside, warmth lingers, mingling with the smell of smoke, wool, and straw. The air is heavy but safe. You close your eyes, letting peace settle. The children's breaths blend with the animals, the soft crack of cooling wood, the parents' sighs. This is not ordinary comfort. It is primal, the knowledge that warmth survives when shared. You listen until the rhythm carries you too. The house fades into silence, the world into stillness. Somewhere, under frost and centuries, a child dreams beside the fire, safe, warm, and loved. Night deepens, and the cottage rests in a silence thick enough to feel. You stir slightly, sensing the air around you, rich with the story of all that has unfolded in this small space. The smell of smoke, peat, wool, sweat, dried herbs, old straw, and the faint sweetness of baked grain blends into something uniquely human. It is the scent of life held within stone. Travelers and early natural philosophers often remarked that the aroma of a medieval home was unforgettable. Visitors to peasant cottages frequently noted the combined scent of earth and breath. No perfume could mask it, no soap erase it. Fires burned continuously, and everything, hair, cloth, skin, absorbed its smoke, giving the air a tangible weight. For those living there, however, it was not filth or discomfort. It was familiarity, the perfume of survival. Not all scents were accidental. Some were deliberately added to counteract less pleasant odors. Dried mint, sage, or lavender were hung from rafters. Mothers scattered herbs near the hearth or crushed juniper needles while sweeping. The sharp aroma cut through the smoke briefly, lending fleeting freshness, though it rarely lasted long. An early 15th century priest described entering a home so smoky that he could not immediately see the faces inside. He complained of stinging eyes and soot on his tongue but acknowledged the warmth as the warmth of good people. His account, part critique, part admiration, captures the paradox of such homes, unbearable to outsiders, essential to those who lived within them. Researchers of sensory history suggest that smell shaped memory more than sight in this era. Light was scarce, and colors faded quickly, but scents lingered, marking seasons. Burning peat signaled winter, drying grain meant harvest. Even people were recognized by scent, the shepherd, baker, and tanner each carrying traces of their trade. Inside a cottage, these aromas blended, forming an identity, the fragrance of a life shared by many. Imagine breathing that air now. It is warm, thick, and textured. Smoke scratches the throat, softened by straw's faint sweetness. Beneath it lies the subtle tang of sweat, salt, and ash, the smell of bodies that have worked, eaten, and slept together for years. To modern senses, it may seem oppressive, but to them, it was comfort. To smell the fire was to know it still burned. Folklore from the Low Countries claimed that hearth smoke kept evil spirits away. Clear air invited mischief, while smoke shielded the home from wandering ghosts. Families sometimes thanked the smoke before bed, crediting it with guarding fire and dreams. Whether protective or not, it gave the unseen a presence and purpose. Archaeological evidence shows soot accumulating on ceilings and beams over centuries, turning them nearly black. Yet the soot also preserved the wood, protecting it from rot and insects. The same substance that choked lungs safeguarded homes. The balance between harm and benefit was constant, and people adapted to it naturally. Now picture the family asleep within this cloud of scent. The father's cloak smells of hay and damp leather. The mother's blanket carries wool and milk. The children's hair faintly smells of the goat they sleep beside. These odors are inseparable from their identity, evidence of what they love and rely on. When one departs on a journey or pilgrimage, their absence lingers like silence. Some historians note that smell acted as emotional language long before words could express feelings. Sharing the same air as family and animals reinforced a sense of belonging. In a time without perfumes or soap, the scent of smoke and sweat became the scent of love itself. A household practice recorded in Normandy describes airing bedding on rare sunny days. Families carried straw mats outside, letting the cold wind refresh them. The earth, frost, and wind replaced the indoor air temporarily. When bedding returned inside, the freshness lasted only one night, yet it was worth the effort. Imagine that contrast, the crisp outside air meeting the smoky warmth indoors. Every time the door opens, the two worlds exchange scents like polite guests. Breathe in, drawing both the morning cold and the deep musk of life within stone walls. Historians debate how these sensory environments shaped medieval thought. Some argue that smoke and earth connected people more deeply to nature, to the cycles of fire and decay. Others suggest it dulled discomfort, encouraging acceptance. Perhaps both are true. Life was inseparable from the sense that sustained it. Shift slightly on the straw. Feel its rough texture. Hear the soft sigh of the fire. The air is close yet alive, the warmth faint but loyal. Breathe again, slower now, and notice how scent defines the space. It is not filth or inconvenience. It is memory, lingering in every corner. Outside, frost deepens. Inside, smoke curls lazily toward the rafters, lingering for years. Close your eyes and inhale that invisible history, a reminder that living here meant breathing the story of endurance. Morning arrives slowly, pale light spilling across the rough floor. Your breath drifts in faint clouds. The fire has died, leaving gray ash and glowing coals. Warmth has vanished with the night. Your heavy body resists rising, but the cold pricks at your skin, a reminder that survival demands movement. Travelers' journals and household records note frost often formed inside peasant cottages in the coldest months. Water in cups froze solid, thin sheets of ice-coated walls near doors. Families sometimes awoke to see their footprints marked in frost across the floor. To us, this seems unbearable. To them, it was simply winter. Sit up and notice the frost sparkling inside the door, catching the morning light like glass. The floor is hard, the chill biting through to the bone. Around you, the family stirs. The mother rubs her hands briskly, blowing on her fingers before reaching for the poker. The father kneels by the hearth, breath fogging the air as he seeks a spark. Parish notes record that some families kept buckets or jugs of water beside the fire, not for drinking, but to prevent freezing. The water acted as a small heat buffer, though thin ice often formed, cracking at the touch of a hand. Archaeological evidence supports this vision of frozen mornings. Layers of soot and frost residue on inner walls show that homes regularly dropped to near outdoor temperatures before sunrise. The thick stone retained cold as efficiently as it once held warmth. There were no quick fixes, only movement and patience. Picture it now. The father crouches by the hearth, gently blowing on the last red ember buried beneath ash. A faint orange glow flickers across his face. He adds a few twigs, then a small piece of wood. The flame shivers, catches and grows, spilling light across the room. Everyone leans toward it instinctively. This warmth is more than heat. It is reassurance that another day has begun. Interestingly, the smoke that fills the room changes each morning. Its scent depends on the wood, the weather, the dampness in the air. Sometimes it stings the eyes. Other times, it feels like comfort itself. Reviving the fire is a careful ritual, performed with quiet respect. In old speech, the first spark of the day was often called the child's breath, symbolizing new life returning to the home. The children wake slowly, rubbing their eyes, cheeks pale from the cold. The mother tucks a blanket around the smallest one and moves closer to the fire. Steam rises from their breath as they speak softly. The father feeds another stick to the flame, his expression calm but weary. This pause between freezing and warmth, between silence and sound, occurs every winter morning, repeated for generations. A monk's journal from 1327 records a visit to a midwinter village, noting frost hanging like cobwebs inside homes. He observed that even laughter froze quickly but admired how people smiled anyway. Their joy, he wrote, was a warmth the sun had forgotten. His words, part observation, part wonder, still resonate across time. You breathe deeply, tasting the dry cold air. Outside, frost clings to every branch and fence post, glazing the world in silver. Inside, the fire pushes shadows and cold into corners, replacing the sting of ice with the scent of wood smoke. Life resumes its quiet rhythm. The mother ladles thin porridge into wooden bowls, steam curling gracefully upward. The sound of spoons against wood fills the room. The children eat quickly, cheeks flushing pink again. For them, frost is simply part of the day, something to laugh at when it melts from their fingers. Historians debate how these hardships shaped temperament. Some believe the cycle of cold and heat, deprivation and renewal, taught patience and gratitude. Others suggest it dulled emotion, forging endurance at the cost of comfort. Yet moments like these, watching warmth rise from ashes, feel like faith, not in miracles, but in routine. The father opens the door briefly. A gust of icy wind swirls ash into the air. Outside, the world shines under a pewter-colored sky. The cold stings the lungs but sharpens the senses. Every sound feels crisp. He closes the door, and the house exhales warmth in return. Old English folklore claimed that frost inside a home was the brush of angels at night. Children were told that touching it gently could bring luck. Perhaps people gave beauty to hardship, turning signs of cold into blessings rather than curses. You look at the frost again, melting in the fire's heat. Tiny rivulets run down the walls, carrying traces of smoke and age. The house smells of fire once more. The light grows stronger. For a moment, everything shimmers. Frost, flame, breath of life returning. You close your eyes, letting the warmth touch your face. The cold is still present, but no longer an enemy. It feels part of the pattern, as necessary as air. In the rhythm of freezing and thawing, of silence and flame, you sense the quiet strength that sustained these people. The frost glitters one last time before vanishing, and you breathe out slowly, as if melting a bit of it yourself. Light filters through the parchment window, thin and gray. The fire now spreads warmth across the floor. The family moves slowly, bodies stiff from the night. The father rises first, pulling on a heavy cloak. He kneels by the hearth, stirring the embers into bright flame. The mother follows, wrapping a scarf around her head, reaching for a wooden bowl of grain. The air hums with the faint rhythm of morning chores. In rural Europe, families commonly began days before the sun fully rose. Winter daylight was too precious to waste. The first task was always the same: revive the fire. Without it, nothing else could happen. No food, no light, no comfort. The fire was a tool, but also a companion, demanding care at every dawn. A 15th-century household manual advises feeding the flame as one feeds the soul, with patience and steady breath. The line sounds poetic now, but was literal then. Coaxing a coal into life required slow, practiced breathing. Each family member knew the rhythm, as essential as prayer. You watch in your mind. The father adds kindling, the mother blows gently until the faint orange becomes gold. Smoke rises, twisting lazily toward the roof. Soon the pot is set over the flame, filled with yesterday's broth and a handful of oats. The aroma spreads, heavy and sweet. The first meal is small but sacred. Researchers note that medieval mornings began in silence. Voices were kept low, perhaps out of habit or respect for the fragile fire. Children watched and learned, hands clasped around bowls, eyes reflecting the flame. The house warmed not just through heat, but through motion, every breath, stirred pot, shared glance. Warmth also reflected social order. The one tending the fire, usually the mother, claimed the place nearest it. The father stood behind or near the door, preparing tools or feeding animals. Children waited farther back until called. Everyone knew their role in this choreography, an unspoken understanding of priorities. An account from a German village notes that families often placed bare feet on hearthstones as soon as the fire was alive. The heat against cold skin was said to wake the body faster than food and strengthen the heart. Whether superstition or simple pleasure, this ritual marked the day's beginning. You can almost feel that warmth now. Slowly, the stone walls exhale their stored chill. The air fills with wood smoke and oatmeal. Frost on the window softens, dripping in light-catching trails. It is a quiet victory, repeated every day for centuries. Historians debate whether medieval mornings inspired hope or reflected resignation. Some saw purpose, others endless labor. Yet watching this family, feeling comfort in these small successes, it becomes clear, survival and purpose were one and the same. The warmth of the fire, the aroma of breakfast, the quiet stir of life returning, it was all enough. The mother handed a steaming bowl to her husband. He nodded in thanks, saying nothing. Words felt unnecessary here. The children followed, their faces still flushed from sleep. The room seemed to glow brighter, not from sunlight, but from the fire. Its light touched every surface, turning even the soot-darkened rafters into something fragile and beautiful. An early traveler once wrote that peasant homes at dawn resembled hives stirred by human bees. The observation was kind. There was motion, purpose, and cooperation. Each person tended to their role in the quiet rhythm of necessity. This was the hour of preparation, the moment that could determine whether the day would thrive or falter. You notice the sounds again, the crackle of fire, the faint scrape of spoons against bowls, the whisper of breath between words. Everything in the room feels alive yet calm. Even the animals moved in step with the household. The goat shook its head, the cow shifted its weight, and the dog stretched near the door. Life renewed itself in these small gestures. A curious belief from rural Ireland held that a good morning fire could predict the day's fortune. If the flame burned steady and high, the weather would be kind. If it sputtered or filled the room with smoke, trouble was near. The mother glanced at the fire and smiled faintly. The flames rose clean and bright. Perhaps the day would indeed be gentle. The father stepped outside, his breath visible in the still, frosty air. The frost sparkled like powdered glass. He stood quietly, letting the light touch his face, before closing the door behind him. Inside, the warmth persisted. The family moved through their tasks, bound by habit, necessity, and a softer thread, contentment. Smoke and grain filled the senses. The cold lingered at the edges, but it no longer ruled. The fire hummed softly, a promise renewed. In mornings like these, generations found meaning. The house had survived another night, and that alone was enough. Evening came faster than expected, as it always does in winter. Light faded quickly, slipping through roof cracks, and the air turned dull and gray. The cold crept back into the stones, patient and familiar. But tonight felt different. The air held a rare vibration of anticipation. It was a feast night, one of the few times warmth belonged to everyone. Parish records and monologues note that winter festivals were the heartbeat of medieval life. After weeks of meager meals and silence, villagers gathered to celebrate. These moments of abundance, tied to holy days or harvest ends, were less about luxury than remembering joy. Food, drink, firelight, and laughter broke the monotony of endurance. Inside the cottage, preparations began early. The father returned from the fields with a small joint of salted meat, precious as treasure. The mother ground grain into coarse flour, mixing it with honey and milk to make bread. The smells of roasting fat and yeast filled the air, blending with smoke and transforming the space into something almost sacred. On feast nights, the fire was fed generously. Wood normally rationed was burned freely, flames leaping high, washing walls with orange light. The glow reached every corner, and no one minded smoke stinging their eyes. Warmth itself became a symbol of gratitude. A 14th-century household ledger even mentions that families saved dried fruit or nuts all year for these occasions. Mixed into bread or porridge, they became treats for celebration. Children waited eagerly, hands clasped, savoring the scent that teased their hunger. The first bite was taken in silence, as if joy required reverence. Medieval scholars often note that warmth and feasting were inseparable. Gathering around the hearth provided both physical and emotional nourishment. The fire that kept frost at bay also baked bread, cooked meat, and lit faces with its glow. In that shared light, families felt larger than themselves, connected not just by blood, but by the rhythm of survival. You can almost see it. The fire crackles like laughter. Children sit cross-legged, eyes wide, as the father turns meat over the flames. The mother hums a tune from her childhood, a melody that blends with the sizzling fat. Even the goat shifts closer, the fire reflected in its eyes. Folklore claimed that on winter feast nights, ancestors' spirits visited homes. Sitting quietly by the fire, invisible but content, they shared the warmth they once knew. Families left a small portion of food near the hearth in remembrance and respect. Whether the spirits truly came or not, their presence was felt. An old French sermon notes that eating well on a cold night is a way to praise the Lord for fire. It may seem quaint, but in peasant faith, warmth had deep significance. Eating a meal, sharing it, laughing together despite hardship, all were signs of divine mercy. As the meal began, the father carefully cut small portions, handing them to each family member. No one ate quickly, every bite was savored as if tasting sunlight itself. The fire cast golden light across their faces, and for a moment, the cottage seemed to expand, large enough to hold the world. Outside, snow fell softly. The wind had died, leaving the night still. Distant cottages flickered faintly, each echoing this same ritual. A bell tolled from the church tower, its tone clear and sweet, settling like a blessing over the village. Historians often wonder how such simple gatherings could leave deep impressions. Perhaps it is because shared warmth becomes memory. Each feast night etched itself into hearts, carried through the long, empty weeks that followed. The laughter of this evening would return in the harshest days of February, when cold and hunger pressed hardest. Memory became a second fire. The family finished their meal. The father leaned back, smiling quietly. The mother wiped her hands on her apron, eyes soft with satisfaction. Children giggled at nothing, full of warmth and food. The fire burned lower now, calmer, gentler. Someone hummed again, a slow tune filling the room with drowsy contentment. An old Scandinavian proverb notes, "The fire that laughs tonight will remember you tomorrow." Perhaps villagers believed their hearths held spirits, responding to kindness and joy. You imagine flames flickering as if listening, smoke curling like visible breath. Night deepened. The feast ended. The family drew close near the cooling embers, the air still fragrant with roast and wood. Snow continued falling outside, softer now, gentler. For one brief evening, the world seemed to return what it had taken. You breathe deeply, inhaling the mingled scent of fire and cooking. Warmth lingers long after the flames have died down. For the first time in weeks, the night feels less like survival and more like celebration. Eyes closed, you catch the faint echo of laughter, a quiet reminder that life, even in its fragility, can shine brightly against the cold. The feast has ended, yet its warmth lingers like a subtle perfume. The cottage air feels heavier, almost golden, carrying the memory of fire. Children have fallen asleep quickly, huddled on the straw, faint smiles playing across their faces. The mother hums softly while tidying up remnants of the meal, her movements deliberate and calm. The father sits by the fading fire, hands extended toward the glow, as if speaking silently with the embers. Historical accounts and family letters consistently describe this sensation. After feast nights, a rare calm would settle over homes. It was not grand celebration but a profound pause, a breath between the harsh demands of winter. The fire's glow lingered longer on these nights, as if reluctant to vanish. The air smells faintly of meat and smoke, mingled with rest. Even the animals are quieter, lulled by warmth. The cow exhales heavily in its corner, the dog twitches in dream, and the goat shifts once before settling. A single log collapses in the hearth, sending a soft shower of sparks that fade almost instantly. You sit in the hush that follows and realize, this quiet is not emptiness, it is fullness, the sound of life needing no words. In the Middle Ages, silence was not feared as it often is today. It was understood as space, a sacred stillness following effort and gratitude. A 15th-century spiritual guide even advised peasants to let their minds cool as the embers do, a notion that feels surprisingly modern. Slowing down after work, allowing the heart to find its rhythm, was both a moral and physical necessity. Life required balance, movement and stillness, sound and silence, heat and cold. Now, that cooling can almost be felt. The fire no longer roars, murmuring instead like a river beneath ice. The faint glow of the last coals casts amber and brown across the room. Shadows of the sleeping family stretch long and delicate along the walls. Even the air seems to exhale. Historians note that nights like these were often when stories were told slowly, in the dark, by the fading fire. Tales of saints, miracles, clever wives, wandering spirits, foxes, and kings were shared orally, passed from one generation to the next, each word carrying warmth. You imagine the father beginning one such story, his voice rough from years of labor. The children, half asleep, murmur at familiar parts. The mother listens, a faint smile on her face, hands still busy mending a blanket. The story drifts like a dream, carried on the soft hiss of smoke. A 14th-century scholar once described sitting among peasants, astonished by the vividness of their storytelling. Their words move as embers do, he wrote, glowing brighter with each telling. That is the sensation now, each sentence, a spark, a heartbeat in the dark. Stories were not mere entertainment, they were protection. They filled the silence, warding off the cold and the unknown beyond the walls. The imagination warmed the mind where the body could not. To speak was to keep the night at bay. Folklore from rural Ireland suggests that as long as one person spoke kindly before sleep, the house would not freeze. Words themselves were warmth, shaping air into comfort. Perhaps that is why the family seems so serene. Their stories and songs wrap them more tightly than any blanket could. The fire dwindles, its glow faint yet steady. The father's voice trails off, head nodding slightly. The mother sets her sewing aside, stretching tired fingers. The room glows with the last color of flame, deep orange fading toward silver, as if the world itself is preparing for rest. Researchers often debate whether medieval people could experience true stillness amid constant labor. Yet moments like this offer the answer. Stillness was not the absence of struggle but its completion. The quiet followed work, hunger, and warmth. It was peace earned. You take a deep breath, feeling it echo in your chest. The air has cooled, yet the scent of wood smoke and roasted grain remains. You recall the meal's taste, the faint sting of ash, the softness of straw beneath you. Every sensation feels both real and timeless. Outside, the wind whispers again, brushing the door, testing wall cracks, sighing through the thatch. Inside, nothing stirs. The fire is nearly gone, its last coal pulsing like the day's final heartbeat. You lie down, feeling the straw shift beneath you, pulling the blanket snug. The air cools against your face, warmth held in your body. Sounds fade until only the faint crackle of ash remains. The quiet is vast, not empty, carrying the dreams of those who slept here before. In it, the rhythm of life becomes clear: struggle, warmth, gratitude, silence. Each night ends and begins anew, surrendering slowly to the eternal cycle that shaped all who lived within stone walls, trusting fire to see them through darkness. The last embers fade to shadow, leaving a faint red glow clinging stubbornly to the ash. The house breathes in silence, its walls thick with warmth's memory. You lie awake, eyes open to the dark, feeling centuries pressed gently against the still air. All is quiet, even the wind seems to hold its breath. Chroniclers note that winter nights often ended this way, slow, still, sacred. No candles, no lanterns, just darkness wrapped around the hearth's faint pulse. Eyes learn to see in shadows, loved ones outlined by the cooling embers' glow. To those living here, this was not emptiness but completion. You listen closely. The dog sighs, the goat shifts softly, a beam creaks as frost tightens. The sounds are small, familiar, reassuring. In a world without clocks, this was time's language: breath, wood, silence. A Benedictine text describes darkness as a form of grace, claiming that absence of light allows the soul to rest, freed from distraction. Perhaps that is what you feel now. The darkness is not threatening but gentle, protective. It conceals hardship, softens thought, and transforms every movement into a dreamlike rhythm. The father stirs once, instinctively checking the hearth. His hand hovers over the coals before pulling back, reassured that the embers are safe. Satisfied, he settles again, draping his cloak over his shoulder. The mother shifts beside him, her breathing calm and steady. The children lie quietly, wrapped in shared warmth. Their faces glow faintly from the last reflection of the fire. Though the space is small, it feels expansive. Within these few square meters, the entire story of survival unfolds. Fire, food, faith, and love. The night does not conceal these things. It holds them. Outside, frost spreads across the fields like a silent tide. Inside, the air grows heavy with breath and memory. Historians have often noted the patience of medieval nights. Without machines or artificial light, people existed alongside darkness. They listened to it, trusted it, and allowed it to shape their thoughts. During these long hours, dreams took on their truest form, blending the sacred with the ordinary, existing only in firelight and sleep. A tale from a northern village recounts how families believed the last spark of the fire held the soul of the night. To extinguish it completely was considered unlucky, to let it fade naturally was a blessing. They thought the flame carried their prayers upward with the smoke. You can almost see the faint trail curling into the rafters, vanishing into the cold beyond. Breathing deeply, you notice the cool air, tinged with smoke, wool, and the faint sweetness of hay. The smell feels both real and dreamlike, bridging waking and sleep. The rough blanket scratches lightly against your cheek, while beneath it, the straw shifts with every heartbeat. The world seems to shrink until only warmth, breath, and sound remain. The line between waking and sleeping blurs. Outside, the fields lie blanketed in snow, waiting silently for spring. Trees stand like sentinels under the moonlight. The frozen river gleams faintly, smooth as glass. Far above, stars scatter across the sky, untroubled by the cold, the same stars seen by peasants 1,000 years ago, the same light that watched over them as they slept. Inside the cottage, time has no edges. It flows in circles, flame to smoke, breath to frost, silence to dawn. Survival through the endless winter was not only about fire or food, but about rhythm. Cold was accepted as part of life, and within that acceptance, peace was found. The fire's glow fades into darkness. The house becomes one with the night, indistinguishable from the world outside. Only the pale silver drifting through the parchment window remains, resting on sleeping faces, smoke-darkened walls, and rough beams holding everything together. At last you let go. Your body softens, your mind drifts, and the house breathes with you. There is no fear, no rush, only stillness. Outside, frost thickens, but inside, warmth endures, quiet, persistent, human. You realize survival depended not solely on fire but on togetherness, shared breath, layered blankets, patient waiting for light. Survival became rhythm, transformed into art. As sleep takes you, you carry that rhythm with you, ancient as stone, tender as the ember fading to ash. The world quiets into silver. Frost glimmers beneath a star-filled sky. Inside, everything rests. The air is cool, yet no one feels it. The warmth lingers, woven into straw, wool, and dreams. The house itself seems to sleep, timbers creaking softly like an old friend's breathing. The faint sweetness of the fire that burned hours ago lingers, wrapping the family in memory. Each member is folded into the other's warmth, hands and hearts touching in darkness. Speech is unnecessary, the night understands. Outside, the wind drifts across frozen fields, smoothing the snow. Far away, a church bell tolls once, low and deep, carrying like a whisper through the air. The cottage listens but does not stir. Time slows to the pace of breath. Lying there, you imagine sensing the rhythm of their dreams, the calm weight of centuries settling around you. The fire may be gone, but the heat remains. Darkness feels soft, not empty, full of life waiting for dawn. Soon, the first light will arrive, pale, cold, touching the stones, waking the house, calling a new day into being. But for now, the world sleeps, and so do you. The last ember glows one final time, a tiny sun caught in ash, then fades into perfect peace.